So I am Miriam Ruan, the president of the Association of Philadelphia Tour Guides, APT. So welcome to everyone to Birch's Views of Philadelphia with Dr. Emily Cooperman. I think I'll go ahead and read this. Emily T. Cooperman is an architectural and landscape historian and historic preservation consultant. She serves as the principal of Arch Preservation Consulting and as a senior consultant for Preservation Design Partnership. Her published work includes, with Lea Carson Sherk, William Birch, Picturing the American Scene from Philadelphia, University of Pennsylvania Press, 2010. So with no further ado, we could all welcome Dr. Emily Cooperman.
Thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to be with you this evening. It's been a pleasure to go back to Mr. Birch. It's been a while since I've thought about him. I spent a lot of time thinking about him for a long period of time. His work and his life were the subject of my PhD dissertation at Penn in the art history department. And in addition to the monograph that really was sponsored by the Athenaeum of Philadelphia, and with which I worked very closely, and very grateful for the opportunity for having done that with Lea Sherk. We also published in the Penn Press a reprint of his Country Seats of the United States with a fairly hefty introduction that I wrote about the book, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But my aim tonight is to really talk to you about to contextualize the Philadelphia views by talking a little bit about who Birch was, what his other work was, and how his work really fits into the overall picture of our understanding really of the American landscape, which may sound a little ambitious, but I think it's really not an overreach. All right, well, with that, I'm going to, I hope, make my PowerPoint do its thing. Is that working? Everybody here see that? Okay, great. Thanks, Mike.
Yes.
All right. So who is William Russell Birch and why do we care about him? This is a self-portrait from, I'm not quite sure when, probably the early part of the 19th century after he'd come to this country. His penetrating gaze is really speaks volumes. Well, I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with this image. Birch is back at the State House from the city of Philadelphia in 1800. And one of the things that I think is important to understand for tour guides is, in a sense, Birch was really the first tour guide of Philadelphia and beyond. And his city of Philadelphia was, in a sense, it was a tour. It was set up as a tour. And it is set up as a tour in the tradition of picturesque tours, which is a whole other subject. But in fact, the picturesque is a very long subject that I won't really begin to be able to go into in any depth. But it's an important subject, and it goes back to the idea of how one understands the place that you're in, the country, the city, and its values, it's the stories that are associated with it, and it's the narratives that are part of our understanding of place. So for me, his importance is not just as an artist for its aesthetic merit, but this place really gives you a window into the city of Philadelphia, and his work really gives you a window into what the place of the artist was in this period. Birch's life also tells us a lot about transatlantic progressive politics, believe it or not, the relationship between landscape design and landscape depiction, because Birch was not only an artist of landscape views, but he created designs for landscapes. And as I said, I think one of the most important things is how we in this country came to perceive the American landscape and sense of place, which really Birch tells us a lot about. One of the things that I'm going to come back to, but I'm going to start with now, is this is not equivalent to these. They are different. They're fundamentally different. Although, if you just pause for a moment and think how much time and effort and how many choices Birch and his son, because Thomas did the drawings for the city of Philadelphia, how many choices were made in what went into that image, what the angle was, where the light falls, where the people are, what the people are doing, and what you can see through the trees, and what the emphasis is in this image, the various points of emphasis. So, for example, I know somebody at some point, and I don't remember who it is, and it's probably better that I don't remember, said that, oh, well, there were a lot of Indians in Philadelphia in this period, and that's why they're in the picture. Well, yeah, maybe, but there's a lot more going on here than that. Look at the fact that they are gesturing in a certain direction. We'll come back to that. And look where the light is in the background. Also an important thing. I mean, it could also be said that those photographs are constructed images. So for example, now we can look back 25 years later at the image of 2000 of the State House or Independence Hall. You say, oh, look, it's a place where families went. And it tells you about how we perceived the site at that point. So Birch. Birch was born in Warwick, in England. He was the son of a medical doctor, and he grew up there and didn't do too well in school. I think he really had trouble with words. He was much stronger in images than words. One of the important things that we have from Birch is the fact that he wrote an autobiography, which is easier to understand when you read it in his manuscript than in the typescript. We edited it, Leah and I edited it so for legibility, but in its unedited version, it's a little tough to read. So his talents were clearly in terms of the visual. So he grew up in Warwick, didn't really know where how to find himself, and eventually his family arranged for him to go to London, and I'll come back to that. But what was around him, what was in the air in terms of the kind of visual culture that he was absorbing, can be seen in the work, for example, of William Hogarth. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because there are a number of kind of clues. It's almost like a cartoon. There are things that are visual jokes. There are visual cues, and it's called an emblematic process. So for example, this is one of the images. This is plate number 3, which were engravings after a series of paintings that Hogarth did called The Harlot's Progress, which charts the arc of a woman coming to London to try to make her fortune, and she becomes a prostitute after being essentially a kept woman. And at this point, she is fully a prostitute. And there are things in this image that tell you about that she is, what's going on with her. So for example, if you look at that cat, that is a very clear body remark about her, because it's right in front of her and what that cat is doing. And so over on the windowsill on the left side of the image are little vials, which were probably supposed to be cures for syphilis, for example. So there's lots more you can tease out from this, but I just wanted to give you an idea that this is the kind of background that informed what Birch was doing. A caricature of the figure of Charles Churchill, which was a kind of a battle between Charles Churchill and William Hogarth. We can see that this is supposed to be a caricature of Churchill himself. So that's the kind of thing that Birch, and we know that Birch knew this image very well. He writes about it, and he calls it a perfect depiction of human nature. A political art cartoon by James Gilray also gives you a sense of the kind of elaborate visual language that had really developed in England in the latter part of the 18th century that was part of Birch's background. So as I said, he makes his way to London, probably in the 1770s, and he comes as an apprentice to a jeweler. And in the process, he learns to do enamel painting. He also knows a lot about gems, which actually comes in handy later on when he's in this country, but that's a story for another time. And he was exposed to this kind of object. He may have created it. We don't know that he did this, and I certainly wouldn't suggest that he did, but I suspect this is the kind of thing that he may have done. He also absorbed in this period the taste for landscape depiction, which was really on the rise. It was a new genre in England in this period, to get away from some of the classical history pictures that had previously dominated the art scene. So this is the kind of object that he probably made or participated in making, or certainly was exposed to. And this is this kind of miniature scale that he worked in for pretty much most of his life, except for the city of Philadelphia views. And this is actually his enamel palette. And shows that he continued, rather than talking about himself as an artist, he talked about himself as an enamelist. And that really came from how he started in his career, which is after he left the jeweler, he began to make a living for himself by creating miniature versions of paintings by well-known artists. And among these were the paintings that he created in terms of little of miniatures that could be worn or carried, like this pendant miniature that were after Reynolds. And we know that he did a lot of miniatures after the work of Reynolds. And he talks in his autobiography about his place within the realm of Reynolds's orbit, that was one of his important connections in London, who got him work, he was essentially kind of hanging on his coattails. He was hardly the only person who was in that position, but he benefited, it was probably a better way to put it, from Reynolds' position and his connections to his clients, who and therefore created the miniature versions of the paintings that Reynolds were doing for his sitters. So Reynolds is up there in the upper right, a miniature, obviously. On the left is another really important figure in Birch's life in London, William Murray, the first Earl of Mansfield. Birch lived at Hampstead Heath on Murray's estate. Murray lived at Kenwood House, which still stands today. You can go visit it if you're in London. I recommend it. And the other person who was particularly important to Birch in London was Nathaniel Chauncey, who you see in the bottom right. And Chauncey was an antiquarian. He was an aesthete. He introduced Birch to a lot of aesthetic issues, a lot of aesthetic questions, took him traveling around England on picturesque tours, and introduced him to a lot of the concepts that would be important for his professional career. In the process of creating these enamels, he realized he could make prints, and they are allied media. So he says he created an enamel version of the Ouse Bridge at York, and then he realized, oh, I can make a print out of this, because you use a kind of template to create both. So there's a sort of step and repeat process in enameling that lends itself to the way of making an etching. So he engraved this one first in 1784, and then went on to create a whole series of prints after the work of a lot of contemporary artists in England, many of who exhibited at the Royal Academy, and of landscape views. And he pulled together 36 plates, and including several original images of landscapes that he created, but they're primarily copies after other paintings. And he published his first book, The Délices de la Grande-Bretagne, meaning The Delights of Great Britain. And it was intended to bring together all of the delights of the British landscape. And so it shows subjects all over Britain, up into Scotland. And it was a success. He garnered some 240 subscribers. At this point, books would not be produced for an open market. Books of this sort were not produced for an open market. They were produced for subscribers. So essentially on order. The number of them, his patrons were royal and aristocratic. A number of them were the sitters for Reynolds, so the connection to Reynolds was very important. And so he did very well and published this in 1791. And one of the things I want you to remember is that the city of Philadelphia was a book. It was created as a set of views with a very specific order. And we know the order because of the bound versions. And so it is a book that has a very specific tour within it. And I'll get back to that. So that's an important thing. These are not images that were isolated and separated and sold one at a time. They were sold in sets and they were sold in numbers. So there were sections that were sold and then the full set. And finally, his final book. So he really produced three books: The Délices, The City of Philadelphia in 1800, and The Country Seats of the United States, which he published in 1808. So he came to Philadelphia in 1794. And for those of you familiar with the Philadelphia Views, you know that this is one of the early ones. I'll come back to it in a little bit when I walk through the book, so to speak. The Arch Street Ferry. He came here in 1794, and I hope everybody's remembering that in 1794, the U.S. Capitol was still here. And but the decision had been made to leave it in accordance with the Compromise of 1790 for that swamp down there, which shall remain nameless. And so but he, like a number of other foreign artists and designers, came to Philadelphia hoping to make their fortune as part of the new country in the capital city. It didn't work out for most of them. And in fact, the city of Philadelphia was one of the rare moments of success for these early artists and designers. And he left England because Reynolds had died, Mansfield had died, Chauncey had died, and he really needed to reinvent himself in this country in his middle age. He also had family connections in this country, specifically to Samuel Chase, the Supreme Court Justice, who was technically his nephew, even though Chase was older because he was the son of Birch's much older sister, who had come to this country and married Chase's father. And this is a map that Birch drew of the Chesapeake region, which shows a lot of the places that Birch traveled to and spent time in. He was entertained by his relatives in Annapolis, his Chase relatives, which you see down at the bottom. He actually spent time in Bladensburg, which you see down there on the bottom left, outside of Washington, in Bladensburg, Maryland, where he designed a garden. And he also spent time traveling on the eastern shore, and in up around Bel Air, and in Cecil County, Maryland. He spent quite a bit of time at Hampton, which you see sort of just left of the center, which is still there today. I hope many of you are familiar with Hampton, north of Baltimore. And one of the reasons that he came here is because he felt that he had a claim to lands up in northeastern Pennsylvania, northeastern Maryland. And when I first read about that in his autobiography, I thought he was crazy. He had sort of lost his mind at the end of his life. And then I found a whole group of papers at the Historical Society charting the minute machinations between members of his family trying to cement their claim to this land. So he was not alone in fighting to try to get a toehold for this property. And he wasn't crazy on that score. When he first got to Philadelphia, he had a letter of introduction to William Bingham from Benjamin West. And for a while, he served as a drawing master for William Bingham's. And this is, I'm sure many of you are familiar, this is William Bingham's house on 3rd Street, which is no longer there, as you know. And he served as a drawing master for William Bingham, but he got a furnace together, and he started to create enamels in Philadelphia. And one of the most successful connections that he made early in his career was to Gilbert Stuart. And he used to call these miniatures that he did after various Gilbert Stuart portraits of Washington, he called them his $100 bills. Because he did very well from these, and so he was clearly beginning to realize that maybe he was going to do really well in this country, and he did at the beginning. So a brief moment to talk about pictures of Philadelphia before Birch. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. I'm sure you're all familiar with this image at the Pennsylvania Academy. Benjamin West pen treaty with the Indians. Again, remember, this is not a photograph. This is a very, very carefully constructed image that was created at a time when the Penn family claims in Pennsylvania were being questioned. And this is kind of a, hey, look, we did this. This is all legit. But it also has a number of emblematic elements that are really crucial. It's not just kind of a proof, a piece of evidence that this transaction took place, that the Penn family had a legitimate claim to lands in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of symbolic elements going on here, and they relate in part, the size of that treaty elm. The treaty elm is a representation of the bounty of American nature, and its beneficence over the Penn family claim, and so on and so forth. And so the fact that it is on the right side, for those of you who know the print, it's reversed, but this is the original orientation. There is a kind of movement that is suggested that progress is going towards that bounty of the American continent. And this is a Baroque painting. This is from Rome, but the reason I included it is because I wanted to remind you and let you know, those of you who are not familiar with it, that a figure of an American Indian had been an emblem, a symbol of the American continent for quite a long time, for well over a century. So the viewers in the 18th century would see the depiction of the Lenni Lenape in this picture, not just as representations of individuals, but as representations of a continent. So there's a kind of legitimation of Penn's pact, not just with the Lenape, but with the land itself. So another important element of pictures of Philadelphia before Birch is represented by this engraving, which some of you may be familiar with. It was first published in the Columbian magazine, and it was after an image by Peale. But the original is from the background of a portrait. That was where it came from, and it didn't appear as an illustration all by itself. Look, here's a nice picture of the State House. it appeared in the context of a verbal narrative, a story about what was going on in the State House at that point. And what I want you to, I know it's a lot of text, sorry, but let me just read the top paragraph on the upper right. The annex plate presents a view of the State House of Pennsylvania, a building which will perhaps become more interesting in the history of the world than any of the celebrated fabrics of Greece and Rome. So this is, but look, does that look like a very important building? Maybe not. So what the point is here, that the image is not doing the work, the pictures are. But they're complementary, but the words are ones that are really carrying the freight in this image, which is a little different from what's going on in the treaty image. Tales of woe. I bring this up because Birch's contemporaries, I mentioned other artists who came to Philadelphia and to the young United States in the period when the capital was in Philadelphia, all basically flopped. Some of them died drunk, at least one or two, and none of them sold the images that they thought would sell like hotcakes, because these kinds of images were all the rage in London, where they come from. And these artists, including George Beck, whose work you see here, assumed there would be a market for American views in this country. Some American views, when they were sent back to England, sold well, but they didn't sell well in this country. They weren't particularly interested. So, but Birch sees an opportunity. So what's so important about 1800? I'm hoping everybody says, well, that's when the capital left. Yep, that's what happened. So the city of Philadelphia, the state of Pennsylvania, North America, as it appeared in 1800, so this is kind of another testimonial. This is truth. I'm giving you a testimonial about the city of Philadelphia. And it was a testimonial that did this, is what Birch said. No other work of the kind had ever been published by which an idea of the early improvements of the country could be conveyed to Europe, to promote and encourage settlers to the establishment of trade and commerce. So it's about business. The nation's early progress led the restless minds of those with capital to expect nothing but a forest. Okay, so there's nothing there, but there's uncouth savages. Seeing instead number after number of the elegant establishments of the city, my publication, so he's talking about what happens when it was done and it was sent to Europe, soon caused the full effect of its intention by the arrival of funds, talents, projectors, and every other aid that a new country could wish. So it's a promotional tool. It's a testimonial and it's a promotional tool. That's really, and he managed to take on, to find a niche that no one else could figure out in creating picturesque views in this period. So I'm going to give you a tour of the tour. And what this is going to show you is the sequence of the plates that we know about from the original edition. And things did change in later editions, but I'm going to talk about the first one. So we begin on the outside skirts of the city, on the top and the bottom, at shipyards. We entered the city the way people would come in from the Arch Street Ferry Wharf, which we saw a little bit earlier ago. Then go to the heart of the commercial city, Market Street. Then see other evidence of grand buildings. Then look at the residential city and its progress in 2nd Street and 3rd Street. Then go to the sort of heart of the matter, to the State House and the cultural institutions that are around it. Then look at another series of important social institutions that are regulating society and controlling it in a way that's beneficial for all, maybe. And then finally, with the demonstration of both important professional design in the form of Benjamin Henry Trove's buildings and collective communal effort. So the prologue, the bounding to the city of the north, is that city and port of Philadelphia. You can see here again that emblematic tree with the American flag prominently displayed over there, highlighted, and the city laid out with its large boats representing the scale of its commerce and the extent of its development. And starting there, with the site of the treaty, is no accident, because it talks about the fact that, look at this miracle, this miraculous opulent city that has risen as if from nothing in 100 years, from this confirmed by Charter William Penn. The work will stand as a memorial of its progress for the first century. So it's not so that he starts, in a sense, at the chronological beginning, or what he sees as the chronological beginning. And then next, on to Arch Street. And as I said, the Arch Street ferry, where many people would come in to the city, certainly from Camden. And not only do you see people coming in, but you see just the scale of that shipping vessel in the middle of the or at the wharf is gargantuan. So that's a message all by itself. But I want to bring your attention to one little detail, which is weird when you look at it. You suddenly think, what is that? Why is there an anchor and some weird toadstool looking thing over there? Well, I don't think that's a toadstool. I think that's a sheaf of wheat. And what you're seeing is again, an emblem of the seal of Pennsylvania, which includes a plow and a sailing vessel and sheaves of wheat. So it's another emblematic insertion into this image. Also, keep an eye on that horse. You'll see it again. Arch Street, a civilized community. And so again, where's the light? The light is on the progress of development of residences. What else do you see in this image? You see a fashionably dressed couple. Also in the light, despite the fact they're in the shadow of the building. There's a black, I think it's a boy, looking up at them. I think one of the aspects of the Birch's views, which I didn't really wrestle with 25 years ago, but with which I'm beginning to try to ponder more these days, is there are presences of Black people in these images. I think Birch did not write about Black people in Philadelphia, so I don't know what his feeling was. He tended to be a political progressive. So my guess is that he might have been an abolitionist. I don't know, but that is an absolute guess. I think one of the things to remember that is at the turn of the 19th century, there was in fact no universal abolition in Pennsylvania. The 1780 Act for Gradual Emancipation did not free people in Pennsylvania. It only allowed for those born after that date into slavery to cease to become slaves at the age of 28. So it was not an act. The 1780 Act was not an act of manumission. So you do see. It's interesting to see this sort of there is an admiring young Black person in many of these issues, sort of looking at wonders. And this is the first instance here. But I think the other things that you see in this instance is sort of the provision of infrastructure. So you've got a well, you've got a watch house, you've got light, street lights, you've got a public house. So there is sort of a whole series of civilized elements to the city that are demonstrated, and note where that spire is. That spire is so we are a godly city. even if we're Presbyterians. No. That's the reason I mentioned that is because Birch actually came from a dissenter. His mother's family were Presbyterians. More of the same. You see in the old Lutheran Church and the new Lutheran Church, you see, in a sense, a kind of tale of progress from older style of architecture to a very up-to-date preaching hall. And again, you're going to, I think we have to look at the figures of the Indians. I don't know if they're Senecas, Oneidas, Onondagas, Stockbridgers, or Tuscaroras. This was, I circled that because that would be impossible. Birch was not there. So this is not from my book, somebody else. And so Birch may have indeed seen Indians from various tribes in Philadelphia. I think it would be very unlikely that he wouldn't, but he included them in his images, perhaps as partly documenting that, but also for some of these emblematic reasons. One of the things that's most important in a lot of these images is, where is the person pointing? So here you see a figure in a tricorn hat, and the Indians are all below a tree. Now it's a sign of a pub, but it's a tree. So, and that's clearly not an accident. So what is he indicating, this person with the man with the tricorn hat? He's looking at a series of carts. The one closer to the center has lumber that has been cut and ordered. So the resources of the continent have been rendered useful. And that's in all likelihood what the meaning of that gesture is about. All right. So we've seen the entrance, the beginning, the entrance, the introduction to a civilized city, and now its commercial core, the economic stronghold of Market Street. And where the light goes here is on this up-to-date building, as much as the figures in the foreground who are buying and selling food. So this would have been very much an up-to-date commercial building with its large windows, the kind of thing you would have seen in Bristol or Bath, maybe even in London. So that's, in a sense, another demonstration of not just, Philadelphia doesn't just have a lot of food. It's got a very up-to-date, sophisticated commercial buildings. More civilized facilities in terms of the up-to-date First Presbyterian Church, an almost endless market potential, you might say, and the place and national society of the city. This is the funeral, the commemoration procession. It wasn't a funeral. Sorry, I had to correct myself. Washington's body never came here in 1799, but just a reminder of how important Philadelphia has been in the first years of the Republic. And he did an earlier version, which he then reworked after Washington died, 1799. This is the end of the Market Street part of the tour, and you see that dray with the horse has deposited his goods and is returning back to the port, and that's the First City Troop. Okay, two big houses, grand houses with unwritten narratives. So these would have been seen one way by Philadelphians, but without explanation, they might not have been seen that way. The house intended for the United States, President of the United States, which was not able to be used for the house of the president. It was kind of intended to be a bribe to keep the country, keep the federal government here. Didn't work, as you know. But it's nonetheless another instance of the demonstration of the up-to-date facilities of the city. Another problematic building, this was Robert Morris's mansion after he was sent to debtor's prison, but it shows another example of the sort of sophistication of the architecture of the city as well, if you don't happen to know that story. Second and Third Street. The Second Street view, which I think many people will recognize with Christ Church, again, the position of that steeple tells you a lot. The layers of civilization of the city. It's a settled place. And we have so much going on that we even have a second market in the new market in Second Street. So it's not just the one, we have the two. The First Bank. And again, the ordering of lumber and sticks comes back. Probably not just an incidental, oh, look, this is what people do on the street, but a parallel to the kind of commercial ordering and transformation of goods into capital that is represented in the bank itself. The sort of equivalent of Millionaire's Row, the Bingham House, and the rest of Third Street, looking up the fanciest houses in town. Or demonstration, again, of the extent of civilization. Okay, next is the State House Group. And remember, if you think about the State House Group, the State House was the seat of the federal government as well as the city government and the state government at this point. So, but what Birch emphasizes are the cultural institutions that are around it in these images. The Library Company and Surgeons Hall. Library Company in its original location and its original building. The building that's there now is a facsimile or a reconstruction, as you probably know. So, and then in his depiction of Congress Hall, again, where's the light? The light is on the new theater instead of on Congress Hall. So the Congress Hall, and there's a kind of, the way it's organized, these are often read from left to right, like type or like print, so that you see this is the future is the federal past, maybe sort of dim, but the Philadelphia's cultural future is bright. And in a sense, that's what's going on in this image. Again, that gesture is put there very intentionally, looking at the civilization of the State House Square Garden, for example, and at the civilized strollers. And the light in this instance is on the facade in the rear on the right of Library Hall, the Library Company. And you can just about see the sign that says museum over here, which is Peale's Museum, which was located in Philosophical Hall at that point. And so that's it, just gesticulating towards all of these cultural points of progress. And again, I think the State House Garden amplifies this kind of point. Okay, now 3 institutions that regulate society's ill, keep things under control. The Walnut Street Jail. The movement of the building, there's a lot I could say about that. One of the things that have been said, in fact, is that's Mother Bethel's first building. Birch never said that, so I don't really know what the evidence is for that. I suspect this may be a comment about a ramshackle house being moved to Washington, because that's going to the road down towards that you would take out of town to go to Washington. But that's my own interpretation. More of the same, and I think one of the emblematic meaning of these is pretty clear by the fact that you have these animals who are being controlled in both of these images. So you have pigs, swine, who are being controlled in front of the almshouse, and you have a rearing horse being controlled by a soldier in front of Pennsylvania Hospital. And then finally, well, almost finally, the two Latrobe design buildings, Benjamin Henry Latrobe, the first America's first real professional architect, two of his most important buildings in Philadelphia, the Bank of Pennsylvania, and the waterworks. These were really the result of Pennsylvanians gathering together to create these facilities, and so they are demonstrations not just of the sort of up-to-dateness of design, but also of the community effort on the part of Philadelphians to create their own culture. And then finally, the last is the shipyard, which would become the naval yard, the U.S. Naval Yard. So the Philadelphia is prepared to go to war to defend its future, its commercial future. The city of Philadelphia sold very well. And Birch talked about the fact that he made enough money to conduct what he called journeys to the southward. And in fact, he was traveling to sell sets of them in part, but he also completed some actual designs, including the design of a house, the Montebello, which you see on the lower right, Hampton. He visited, he spent quite a bit of time at Hampton, just probably designed some element of the garden there. We don't really know anything about that, but we knew that he did say that he did. These are his drawings of the house for Montebello. It no longer exists. It was where is it? It was on roughly on 33rd Street, if you're near where the Memorial Stadium was, if you're familiar with Baltimore. Birch also designed landscapes, particularly his own property. This was his country seat, Springland, which was on in Bucks County, on the Neshaminy Creek near its mouth at the Delaware. And he talked about the fact that he created it as an example to serve the country, but that no people came to see it. And this was sort of the beginning of his great trajectory of disappointment. And what you're looking at on the right is his watercolor of the entrance that he designed. We don't know how much of that was actually created for Springland. You can see on the upper left here, it says Porter's Lodge. So that's the little building that you see over there. We don't know how much of this was actually ever came to fruition. So on the heels of his success with the city of Philadelphia in 1800, and then he then went on to produce several editions afterwards with some new plates that he introduced over time. But in 1808, he launched another venture, the Country Seats of the United States of North America, which in a sense, like the Delis, addressed all of Britain. The city of Philadelphia intended to provide a picture of the city. The Country Seats was intended to provide a picture of the best of American houses, American country seats that were connected to its important cities. And here you see the Capitol under construction, but the geographic range went from New York, and in this case it's Hoboken, the original house that gave the name to the city of Hoboken in New Jersey on the Hudson, down to Mount Vernon, where he spent some time, and many places in between, including, and like the city of Philadelphia, some of the houses that he depicted in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia area, these are some of the only images that we have of them, or certainly the best from this period. So Lansdowne, which originally was owned by a member of the Penn family, and then became the seat of William Bingham. thereafter, the country seat of William Bingham, and Fountain Green, which was you'll be astonished to learn was at the foot of Fountain Green Drive on Kelly Fountain Green Drive on Kelly Drive, and neither of these exist anymore, as you probably know. Similarly, houses on the Delaware that no longer exist, Devon, and China Retreat or China Hall, which was near where Birch's Springland was. So he was disappointed. He said, "I've published a set of country seats, the plates of which, as far as it continued, were the seats of the Schuylkill River. The work extended to 20 plates, the only work of the kind yet published. But want of encouragement stopped its progress." So he didn't have an audience that was interested in this the way he had an audience for the City of Philadelphia Views. So he ended up in the same trap that some of his contemporaries did, like George Beck, where there really wasn't a market in this period, in the beginning of the 19th century. And that really didn't change until after the War of 1812. So here he is, painted by John Nagel near the end of his life, not looking particularly happy. He was not happy, clearly, in the way he describes his life, and he's somewhat bitter in his autobiography. But his legacy is important. And although I think it would be stretched to say that his influence was particularly strong, in a sense, the ideas of his work were ones that become extremely important in the 19th century and stretch really even today in terms of the way we see our landscape, what we see in it, what we want to see in it, what we think about it. So that he really shows us the beginnings of how American landscape art and perception came about in this country. And so that, I think, is one of his most important legacies. This is actually, one of these is Gracie Mansion and depicts the Villa District in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It's a very interesting image for that reason. One of the things that he brought with him, which was very much not part of American taste at the time, was an interest in what he called wild, unregulated nature. And he created this image of Echo, which was a property on the Schuylkill. And it shows this remarkable vision of just the Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia woods, what he called wild, unregulated nature. So he talks about it as every wild luxury which nature could afford the plastic hand of art. So this was a period in which there was no great appreciation for wilderness. That comes a lot later in the 19th century, but it's an idea that he brings with him that eventually will gain traction. The views, others created after the War of 1812, others began to create engraved views in this country, and then they went on to be very popular as the 19th century progressed. This is one that happens to be of Eagles Field formerly on the Schuylkill up near the zoo. And Cephas Greer-Childs was one of the first artists to begin to become successful with these views in the early 19th century. Thomas Doughty was another whose landscape art begins in Philadelphia. And I think, and Asher B. Durand, I'm including this because I happen to be near the Delaware Water Gap at the moment. I'm up in the Poconos. But I think one of the people tend to think that the American taste for landscape and depictions of the landscape began with the Hudson River School. Nope. Began in Philadelphia and began with William Birch and his contemporaries. So with that, I'm going to end, and I'm happy to take some questions if people have them. And maybe if people could.
If you want to ask a question, there's a raise hand function.
Yes,
should be at the bottom
do
of your Zoom. So please raise
Yeah.
your hand, and then I'll just call on people that I can see at the top of my screen.
Yeah,
Do
thank
your
you.
face and raise your hand.
So go ahead, Wendy.
There's not a function for it here. It's
There
under
is
the
none,
React.
David. React.
It should be under the React
React. Okay.
icon.
Yeah, it should be under the React.
Yeah, she
You
asked
say
that
go.
you not put them in the chat, that you ask it, ask it on camera,
Yeah,
or
I
at
mean,
least, or off camera, but ask.
I'm too stupid to answer questions in two different places. But I'm
So go
happy
ahead,
if you
Wendy.
raise
You
your
want to
hand.
go
I'm happy to
first?
address
Thank you.
questions.
Dr. Cooperman, you had mentioned pay attention to the horse.
Yeah.
Did you have a follow-up on that, or did I just miss
Oh
it?
yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I went by it really quickly.
Oh,
It's the same sort of chestnut horse mare who, or I assume it's a mare. Who knows? Don't know where I came up with that. Um, who travels around with goods, and then at the end of the Market Street sequence is heading back to the port for another round of distribution. So it's not a
thank
big one. It's not a big point, but it's sort of like you see these characters moving around. At like the young black boy who's admiring the couple, then you see him admiring the sort of harvest festival or spring festival with the ox. I don't know. Sorry, not very good with livestock, obviously. Um, and so it's in our from our 21st century perspective, we can look back and say it's a little cinematic, because you see these same characters kind of moving through,
yeah.
which is not which is, you see characters progress and change through, for example, the harlot's progress that I showed you at the beginning. So he didn't make it up, but there is a
I was
commitment.
Thank you. I was just curious to see how much one of those early editions would be, and there's one online for $135,000.
Yeah, I mean the whole set.
Yeah, the one of the original publications.
Yeah, it's they've gone down. If you're
Oh,
interested, you should snap them up.
yeah, no, that's not in my future. Thank you.
If
Okay,
you're interested
Judy.
and you have the available cash, I guess I should say.
Right. Judy, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. I'm curious about the color that we see in these plates. Were these printed? They couldn't have been printed in color. Were they
No,
hand
they're
colored
all hand colored.
and published as colored plates?
Well, you could buy them uncolored or colored, and most
Ah,
people bought them colored. Um, so at least the Philadelphia views. I have never seen a set of the dailies that are colored, but he had several of members of his family who did that work, and I'm blanking on the name of his daughter, who was also an artist. So there's Thomas, and then there was his daughter's name. I'm sorry, I can't remember right now. Who did the color work for Thomas? So they're all watercolors. They're hand colored.
and my
Oh yes,
second
that's a great, good question. Thank you.
my second question was, were these American views popular in England?
Um, in terms of you mean the city of Philadelphia or the other views?
Any of the American views? I mean,
Some of them were. I mean, some of them didn't make it across the Atlantic. I mean, the only thing I can really tell you is that uh, these most of these artists, like George Perkins, George Beck, and I'm blanking on the one who died drunk, but they mostly went back across the Atlantic. They sort of said, "Forget it. This isn't working. I'm not going to make a living here." And so how well they sold to this side is something I've never really looked at. It's an excellent question. I can't give you a very good answer. There were sets that were created specifically for the British market that did better. Some earlier ones, America's Septentrionalis, um, but there weren't. I don't know if they were sold, how well they got sold. That's an excellent question. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer at the tip of my tongue.
thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Charlie. You want to ask your question?
At the Independence Park, there's a series of 24 of the Birch prints in the eastern wing of the first floor there. It's my understanding there were 28 prints of Philadelphia. Is that correct?
I don't remember.
prints are in
I
that.
knew somebody was going to ask me a numbers question. I don't remember off the top of my head. I can certainly answer, give you that answer, look it up and tell you. I don't remember. I'm
My
sorry.
question was why wouldn't they have a complete set? Any reason on that? Why would they
No,
only
I
have
don't know.
85%
I mean,
of the
it all
plates?
depends on when they bought it and how they got it. I mean, there
Yeah.
are there were, I think, 4 editions. I'm sorry that I have to apologize. I'm a little rusty. It's been 20 years since I've looked at this material, so I can't remember. I don't know what, I don't know that, but I think to answer your question, I don't have a specific answer to that one. It all depends on how they acquired it, whether they acquired a full set, whether they bought it as a bound set, whether they acquired the individual plates separately, because they certainly have gotten sets have been broken up and sold, and later editions were not necessarily bound. So those are the most likely reasons that come to my mind.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maria Traub, I guess that's not a Maria there, but
That's Dave.
Dave. You're muted.
Right here.
Where?
I fixed it.
Yeah, you're good now.
Yeah,
You're good.
can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes,
I'm on
we can hear
my
you.
wife. I'm on my wife's computer. That she's Maria, but this is David Traub. I don't so much have a question, but I want to offer praise for this wonderful
Thank you.
program, Dr. Cooperman's presentation, and thank you to the Tour Guides Association for bringing this forward. I was always an admirer of Birch, but I had a limited knowledge of who he was and what he did. Particularly fascinated by his background in England with Hogarth and Reynolds and so forth. And I particularly liked Dr. Cooperman's technique of showing the sites on the plan. That was very innovative, and it gave a glimpse of Birch's urbanistic sensibility, which I would like to think I share with him. Anyway, thank you very much. And
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I don't see any other hands. Oh, go ahead, Greta. You want to ask?
Can you hear me? Oh,
Mhm.
oh, good, because I couldn't see where to press below. Thank you. This was great to see all these images that we are so familiar with, and to see more of the details than we probably observed before. But as I'd like to understand better how he actually produced these prints. You spoke early on about he did enamels, and he was able to make the drawings or his work into enamels and then turn them into prints. I don't understand how that process worked.
There's essentially a kind of transfer print that was used. And beyond that, I'm afraid, again, I'm a little rusty with the details. It's Fiddle, I apologize. But he said in his autobiography that he taught his son, Thomas, who was essentially his apprentice. Thomas did the drawings for the city of Philadelphia, and then he engraved them with another practitioner. So he created a little studio, and that was how they produced them. And the city of Philadelphia images are larger than both the Delis images, which are pretty small, like that. And the country seats are also quite small. So he worked small, except for in the city of Philadelphia, they're bigger. And I think that was because he was able to do it with this kind of studio arrangement with other folks. But and then when you get to Thomas's independent work, he was much bigger. But that was really, the War of 1812 kind of gave him his own career, because he did all these naval battle scenes that he engraved. That's Thomas, which his sister was painting for him.
with watercolors,
Yeah, absolutely. These are all watercolors.
all held up.
Yeah, so they're all hand done. Which is why you see a lot of if you see a number of these, you will see variations in terms of color from one to the next.
Yeah.
And also depending on how much light they've been exposed to, of course.
Okay, Pam, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I'm sorry I joined late. But you mentioned that the country seats were smaller. In the Physic House, we have a small one of the Solitude, which was
Yeah.
John Penn's little bachelor pad. I don't
Yeah.
know if you had mentioned that earlier.
I had thought about including one of those, but I'm afraid I didn't want to devolve into a lecture on the country seats and
Yeah,
this as
yeah.
well, since we have, limited amount of time.
But
But
yeah, that
that's
one is
another lecture.
that one was smaller format.
Yeah, they are, and the plates are all pretty much the same size from one to the next in the country seats. So the size of the plate, and I used to know the dimensions, but I don't right now off the top of my head. The size of the plates is pretty standard from one image to the next in the country seats.
Yeah, I think ours is about 5 by 7.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty small. He worked small. I mean, I don't know if you noticed in that late portrait by Nagel, and I don't know I don't know where that portrait is. It was for sale at auction, and I just grabbed the image. He had a set of little sort of reader glasses on his head. So, which you see in was it James Peale? The self-portrait of James Peale has one. There's one of the members of the Peale family who has one of those same set of glasses. I can't remember which one of the Peales was particularly miniaturist versus the others. You can tell I'm a little rusty on all this. I apologize to everybody. It's been a little while.
No worries. Any last questions? We're like 10 after 8, so well, if we want to give a nice virtual thank you to Dr.
Thank you very
Cooperman for her
much. It's
wonderful
been a real pleasure
presentation.
to do this for you and to revisit my old friend Billy. All
And
right,
there will
thanks so
be,
much.
we have the recording and we're going to put it on the Association of Philadelphia Tour Guides YouTube channel. Probably take a day or two for us to get it up. And then, yeah, so if you want to watch it again or tell your friends who missed it.
And
Thank
if
you
there
so
are
much.
follow-up questions, if you want to relay them to me, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Okay, yeah.
from anyone.
You can reach me as president@phillyguides.org. I guess I could try and write it in the chat here. Oh, there are a bunch. Oh, there's nobody had questions here. Okay, good. Just good. Everybody said great presentation in the chat, so you don't need to look.
Thank you. I appreciate that, everybody. All right. Well, it was a pleasure. Thanks very much.